a specific law that you are susceptible to, and you've probably been victim to it many, many, many times. It's called the law of diminishing intent. Hey there, my friends. Welcome back. So today I want to talk to you about something that I've realized I've fallen victim to so many times in my life. And like everything else in life, in business, in our career, in our personal and professional development, when we become aware of these things, we're able to change them. So this is the law of diminishing intent. And what this law states very simply is the longer you wait to do something you should do now, the greater the odds that you will never actually do it. Now, what does that mean for you? So, I look at this in many parts of sales, in many parts of business, in many parts of our life, right? We look at this and say, well, I know I should be prospecting every day. You might be of the opinion right now that prospecting sucks, because for a lot of us, it does. It's very mundane, it's repetitive, and there's zero dopamine hits because we're getting blocked at every angle, okay? Now, also understanding the law of, cause and effect, the universal laws like gravity, there's always ups and downs. You can't have an up without a down. These are laws. So in our business, we can't have good times if we don't have bad times. We can't have bad times if we don't have good times, because you'd never know the difference. So, but with that being said, if you start really analyzing your life and, your career, your personal life, your professional life, every part of it, right? What we know we should do now in order to better ourselves, because let's call a spade, right? In life and business, it's about getting better. If we are staying stagnant, especially in today's world, because it's moving so fast, we're actually going backwards in time. And as much as that'd be great if we want to win the Powerball, that is not a reality, right? But this law of diminishing of intent, really for me anyways, when I look at this specific law, I realize that we set out kind of at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the quarter, and we say to ourselves, okay, this is what we're going to do. We have these goals. Or even the beginning of the year. I mean, this is probably the biggest one, is at the beginning of the year, where people set out, go, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get in this. And then if you do not act on it immediately, and literally, I mean, there's a few levels to this, right? So it's not just acting on it immediately, because I know there's a lot of people out there that say, well, you just decide to do it and do it. And I believe in that. But I also now realize, as I get busier, as I try and do more and more, as I try and double and triple and quadruple my productivity in a day, right? We have to do things that meet our internal and mental schedule. And what I mean by that is, and these two laws, I believe, work hand in hand, right? They're almost like two pieces of a puzzle that fit perfectly. But without one piece, that puzzle's never complete, right? If that makes sense. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you're saying to yourself, okay, I need to start making cold calls, and I need to start soliciting every day and prospecting every day. So then you sit down and you say, okay, I'm going to create a plan that fits into my schedule. And what you do is you put prospecting at I'm going to do it right away when I come in at 9 a.m. And then you realize very quickly over the course of, say, a week, that you haven't prospected, because 9 to 10:30 is kind of putting out fires. You're that fire person that's, putting out fires, making sure things are delivering on time. Even if you have a team, you're kind of checking in, making sure stats are working, make sure on-time delivery performance, or whatever your metrics are that you do. And then all of a sudden, before you realize it, that diminishing intent, you had a lot of intent to go out and do it. But because you didn't align it into your daily schedule that fits within the process, how your brain operates and how your business operates, that intent is gone. And then eventually, over time, that intent wanes. And then what happens? All of a sudden, markets drop, or you lose a customer, and all of a sudden, now your pocketbook or your lifestyle is impacted. All of a sudden, that intent's back. So when we look at these two laws that operate together, and specifically the diminishing intent, you really got to stop and admit to yourself, first and foremost, yes, I have this. When I say I'm going to do something and I don't act on it immediately, and I'm even talking, you might even act on it immediately, and then a week from now or 2 weeks from now, that gets mundane, right? I don't know about you guys, but for me, I have to constantly be like leveling up in some way. I mean, even to the point where if I don't do it weekly, I wake up in the morning and feel like it's Groundhog Day. And maybe some of you feel like that. I believe a lot of high performers feel like that, and mainly because like we thrive on that next possibility. How do I learn this and get going? And for me anyways, and I think in the end, like when it really comes down to it, we can only speak for ourselves because we live in our own shoes. I don't live in your shoes, but I could tell you from my experience, if I'm not constantly like leveling my mental side up, I get so bored, like so bored. And that boredom leads to saying, I'm just going to fuck it. Not interested in doing it today. Or all of a sudden I jump to something else and I'm like hammy from over the hedge. Like there's all of these processes that I have to realize that I'm doing. And subconsciously or whatever the case may be, it's I have to come to grips with, okay, Dad, how do we do it? Because once we understand it, then we can help, then we can fix it, right? Like G.I. Joe said it best, and I know I've said this a million times for everybody, but knowing is half the battle. So if you know that you suffer from the law of diminishing intent, because we all do, it's a universal law. There's no way around it. If you say you don't, then you're lying to yourself. I do suggest you sit back and truly take a look at what you're doing, because that intent piece and that action piece and the yin and yang that I was talking about, that piece that fits together like a puzzle. Sorry, that's probably not yin and yang because they're complete opposites, but the piece that fits together like a puzzle is the fact that you got to inject it into your daily routine, right? It's like exercising. If you say to yourself, I'm going to, perfect example. So I'll speak from experience. I said to myself, I'm going to exercise at lunch. And in January, when I was finally able to like have the energy, I said, I'm going to exercise every lunch hour. So I'm going to literally stop all my meetings at 10 to 12. Well, very quickly, I mean, for the first 2 weeks, I think I did it. And then after that, all of a sudden it was like 4 or 5 days. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't worked out. Because one meeting went into lunch and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to eat and then I'll work out. And because at that point I'm starving because I tend to intermittent fast in the morning. And all of a sudden now business takes over, right? So I had great intent to exercise for 45 minutes every day. And I soon realized my business schedule, because we're getting busier, because we're launching new products, because we're like, we're scaling, which is what we want to do because that's life vitality. Interfered with my exercise schedule. So what did I have to do? And this is even before I started reading about the law of diminishing intent, is I had every intention. My desire is to be as strong as I can be and be in the best shape of my life at the end of 2024. That was a goal for the beginning of 2024. And I very quickly realized that I'll never achieve that if I don't find a way to inject it into my schedule all day long that creates the least amount of friction. And I think this is where the law of diminishing intent really impacts us all, because it's that friction piece in our daily schedule, right? We tend to do things that create less friction, and we tend to always try and do things that have the least amount of friction. And that's just, I think, human nature. David Goggins is one that says, no, always be uncomfortable, always be. But that's tough for most people to consistently keep in their head, because it's that reiteration of it over and over and over again. And that's where the law of diminishing intent automatically takes over. If you don't rebound and rebound and rebound and constantly give yourself that ability to stay up, stay on, and go forward, that's where things happen. So what I had to do quickly is I had to start injecting exercise intermittently into my schedule until such time as I can truly take lunch off. So, for example, some of you might say, well, Dan, why don't you get up earlier in the morning? And I do, but that part is to walk my dogs. And I put on an audiobook and I just enjoy that process to wake up. I get outside, I get sun on me right away, and I walk for about 5 kilometers. So about like, what, 2.5, 3 miles or something. And that walk wakes me up, right? And then I come in and I start immediately on education. So for me, that morning is the best way for me to wake up, right? So I'm injecting exercise throughout my day. So I literally, to the point where, excuse me, to the point where I put a chin up and dip bar in my office. So as I'm working, as I'm doing demos, as I'm going between prospecting, I'm going over and I'm doing 15 chin-ups or 15 pull-ups and 10, 20 dips. And then I come back and I work a bit, and then I go back and do it, and I come back and work a bit. And for right now, that's what I had to switch to, because I didn't want that law of diminishing intent to start impacting my goal of being in the best shape of my life at the end of 2024. Now, just to give you context here, I'm 47 years old. In my 20s, I was a bodybuilder. So I was in great friggin' shape. Actually, my late teens to early 20s, I was in bodybuilding. So I was in amazing shape. So for me to get back to the best shape of my life is a big one, right? Then I have my other goals, right? My shorter term goals, where in the next 90 days, I want to learn this. In the next 90 days, we want to bring our company to here. So then you got to kind of reverse engineer all of those so that you don't get impacted by the law of diminishing intent. And when you do, now what happens is you kind of got this roadmap. Now, some of you might think, oh my God, I'm going to do that roadmap and that is amazing and I'm good to go. But you're not. See, because this law of diminishing intent is constantly pounding on your door, just waiting for you to open it so it can grab you. So how do you counteract that? And that might be the big question that a lot of you are asking right now is, okay, Dan, I've realized through the last, 10 minutes of this conversation that, yeah, I suffer from this a lot, because I have great intentions on a Friday afternoon when I've realized I've shit the bed on prospecting all week. And then I get back at a Monday. My intent on Friday was great, but my actions on Monday don't mirror the intent on Friday, right? And I think that this is one of the biggest things for salespeople. I think it's one of the biggest things for managers that want to be a better manager. They start reading a book. Within 2 weeks, they put the book down and they don't go back and read it because they've got one little strategy and they're like, oh my God, this is great. This is going to change my life. They apply this strategy for a week and then they forget about the strategy. Diminishing intent. That intent goes away. So how do we master our intent? How do we bring that intent to the forefront of our minds every day? And so my way of doing it, I hope it helps you, is I do 2 things, sometimes 3, but the 2 things are always. So I take this handy dandy thing we call our cell phone, and I set reminders 3 times a day. And the reminders, and now I'm at the point where I get probably 9 or 10 reminders. So there's a few things with this. When you first start with reminders, it's going to pop up. You're going to read it. You're going to be like, yes, I got to remember that. So I set reminders for who I want to be, right? What's the word I want people to remember me for? Okay. And then I set another reminder about an hour and a half later about my intent for the day. Now, I set these reminders at the times I want to do specific tasks. So, for example, in my schedule, I block out sales time every single day. When that reminder goes off on my computer and when the reminder of the intent I set for myself, so I don't get caught up in the law of diminishing intent, then I have 2 things where I say, okay, I got sales calls. Okay, the law of diminishing intent says that the more we procrastinate on things, the less we are going to do it. So I have that reminder and saying, Dan, this is what you reminded yourself to do. I also put reminders in there to do chin-ups, pull-ups, and dips. Now, you might say, well, Dan, why do you do that if you already do it in between tasks? Because sometimes I get so caught up in what I'm doing, I forget to stop from between one task to another, right? Or I subconsciously neglect to stop. Okay. So, and again, my friends, this is based on your personality. Okay. So as we sit here right now on the 3rd of May, I sit here and I say to myself, 1, the biggest obstacle that I'm overcoming mentally right now is the fact that I lost close to 2 years fighting cancer. So I feel like in life, Okay. From a productivity perspective, from a friends, colleague perspective, from a relationship perspective, from everything, I feel like I've lost 2 years of my life. Now, I don't know if any of you have felt like that or had an experience where you've lost specific time. Some of you probably feel when it comes to like friends and family, you might have lost 2 years during COVID. It's one of the biggest things when it comes to the mental disorders and mental challenges that people are having these days, right? Like, and maybe you're still feeling lost because your, your adoption of getting out in public might be hindered, right? Because there's a lot of people facing those issues as well. So, just explaining to you kind of what my mental side is and what I'm going through. So for me, when I'm doing things, I'm trying to get back that 2 years. And trust me, I'm speaking to therapists about it because it impacts every part of my life. Some people might say it's a positive impact. I'm starting to believe it's a negative impact because I'm starting to say things like, I don't have time to do that. I need to get my productivity back to not losing 2 years. And, in conversations with my therapist, the big thing has been, Dan, you're not going to do that. You can only do what you can do. And some of you might be sitting there going, Dan, that's crazy to put yourself through that stress and anxiety. And I know it is, right? But it's like, I feel, and I'm starting to connect the dots in really diving deep into these laws, where I'm starting to feel like this is the law of diminishing intent operating at one of the highest levels, right? It's like, and then I have to stop and say to myself, well, my intent was to get better and healthy. So I still accomplished really good things by doing that, right? But then again, you ask yourself, if you lost 2 years of productivity, of revenue generating exercises, where would your life be and how far behind would you feel? And again, it's that feeling, right? Would you feel you are? And I share all of this with you to hopefully give you more context and a more solid, larger foundation for you to build that skyscraper that is your next level of business on. And so in closing, I challenge you today. It's Friday. It's, where I am, it's a beautiful day out today. There's a weekend coming up. Really start looking at and Google the law of diminishing intent and start reading up on it, because I think understanding this law, there's many different laws, right? There's the law of polarity. There's the law of cause and effect. There's, the law of attraction. There's all sorts of laws. And what I mean by laws, I mean like universal laws that operate no matter what. If you start realizing what these laws are and be honest with yourself and honestly look at your life and how that law might be being applied in your life, I think in the end you're going to realize that it opens up so many doors. Because again, knowing is half the battle. And if we know what we're facing, then all it is saying, I'm going to put this in place. And then how do I remember it? So this brings us to the second way. Y'all think I forgot about that, didn't you? The second way that we can remember how to do things. So with my reminders on the phone, I also put things on my computer. I have things on my keyboard of my laptop. I have things on the top of my iPad cover. And I just tape them on. And so they're in the two corners of my laptop because the mouse pad's in the middle, speakers are on the side, right? On my computer, I have them down below, right? Sometimes I have them hanging off the side. I have pictures on my wall with sayings that remind me to do things I want to do. So one of them is from James Allen, where he says, what you do screams so loud, I can't hear a word you say. And I know you've heard me say this over and over and over again. And I believe this is the core of intent. What we do screams so loud, we can't hear a word you're saying. So you can say till you're blue in the face, I'm going to do this. You can tell your prospects, your customers, till you're blue in the face, I'm going to do it. If your actions do not represent your intents, you will never get to where you want to go. So in closing, the law of diminishing intent tells us that our actions must act a mirror representation of our intents. And if we don't, we lose. And I'd say it's as simple as that. Easy? Hell no, my friends. Simple? 100%. So do yourself a favor. I challenge you today to go out, Google the law of diminishing intent, and treat yourself to one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself by really understanding how that law can help you move forward. Until next time, my friends, remember, go out there, make every call educational, and crush your sales. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.